has got a lot to share.
Welcome to another edition of Radio Friends again. And this is the 12th of January for 2024. I'm Steve Parker, and just trying to keep everybody together here. So talk about the blind leading the blind. I don't know who did this. But anyways, we've got quite a few people, and we've got a couple of special guests on the program this morning. So why don't we go around the room and say hello to the people that are with us so far. Let's start off with Dave Overson.
Hi, how are you? How you doing?
It's John Landry.
Hi, how are you?
And we've got, let's see, we've got Ron Pell is over there.
So I'll say good morning. And Lady and Cameron, I have an interesting connection to Radio Ink magazine in 2002. I was Radio Ink magazine sales manager of the year. And
Awesome.
the gentleman who owned the publication, is he still around? Is he still involved?
Ron,
Eric,
Ron,
Eric Rhodes? Yeah.
Ron, this
Eric
is
Rhodes.
Ron, we're doing a promo now. We're trying to introduce him.
Okay, well, me, Eric Rhodes, that's the guy. Thank you.
And Ron never let us forget that sales manager of the year in Windsor, Connecticut. No, I mean the entire state. Okay. We've got Judge Harrigan is there. The judge is with us. Say good morning, Judge.
Good morning, Judge.
Okay. Joe Connolly, of course. Good morning, Joe.
I'm Joe Connolly, WDRC Ear Witness News.
Man.
I remember that.
Which is just quickly for Laney and Cameron, that was what our newscasts were called because we were radio. Ear Witness News. Hear history in the making the moment it's breaking.
Repeating the
Awesome.
big story. All right, let's see. We've got Tracy Carmen is here.
Good morning, everybody.
Bob Craig is here.
Bonjour.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Clark Schmidt just joined us. Ed Bruder. Say hi, Clark. There he is. Pete Salant. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, Steve, and all my friends.
So let's throw it back to Joe Connolly because he did bring a couple of guests and kind of interesting the way it all came about because Joe is one of these guys that does some different social things. And of course, Joe is one of the biggest newscasters in the world on WCBS in New York City, and sucking up to Joe because he brought us a couple of guests.
Thank
So,
you.
Joe, good morning, Joe. Tell us who you brought along with you.
We have Laney Peterson and Cameron Coates. And I met Laney on LinkedIn when she was looking for some retro radio photos. And I emailed her and said, I know exactly the guy who has a trove of them, and introduced her to Steve. And I just want to tell you, as all of us who come on these sometimes know, Laney and Cameron, you don't have to stay for an hour. Steve says, click off when you've had enough. Don't feel as though you have to stay. But I then got talking with Laney and told her, I said that Steve Parker has created a true public service for the radio industry in these weekly get-togethers that he has created, which came out of the 100th anniversary of WDRC radio a couple of years ago. It was Connecticut's first radio station. And this is a real public service. And when I went to that reunion and started to come to some of these get-togethers, I found it actually rejuvenated me because radio was great. We were the king of the hill and AM news and music, and those were great days. And it got me thinking again, like I thought when we were all coming up. And so this serves as an idea generator for those of us who are still in radio or want to get back into it. And it's also very interesting to hear what people like Pete Salant and others have done who have moved on from radio, because they give us examples of ways that we can reapply our skills in new ways if we want to. But this is just a great public service, and we love it. So welcome to our humble abode, as we used to say when a new employee would come into the radio station.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting to get to sit in on this.
Well, it is one of these things where I said to somebody recently, I said, even though we may be out, some of us may be out of radio, radio is really never out of us. And it is something,
Mhm.
My dad, Charlie Parker, used to say that it's like a bug. And once you've been bitten by that bug, you really can't do anything else but radio. And,
Mhm.
and it is so true. And I think some of the men and women that have left forget that it's a brotherhood or sisterhood. And once we all get together, you kind of look at this as if we got together every week, and had a cup of coffee or something. If we were all living in some senior citizen development together, and we're all down in the coffee shop somewhere. But and I think Pete Salant mentioned it. He said it's kind of a good thing to get together with your friends like this, as we call it, radio friends again, and it gives you a chance to kind of. I guess he said. I think Pete said it staves off Alzheimer's. So I don't know how this whole thing turned out.
Oh no, it really does from a mental health perspective, as a clinical social worker.
connection.
Yeah, it is. We are remaining connected to each other, and there's no reason it ever has to stop as long as we can sit on our fannies and look at
Right.
look at a screen. We're joined together at the hip. It's great.
Yeah, it is something that, and it did come out of as we were saying earlier, Joe had said, we were planning, Ron and I, many years ago, Ron and I both worked at WDRC, and when WDRC was coming up on 50 years of rock and roll back in 2010, because we kind of made it an unofficial date of August 18th, every year, because on August 18th of 1960 was when my dad, Charlie Parker, flipped it to rock and roll. But what we found out was that back then, I think Connoisseur was the owner of the radio station, and they weren't planning any kind of reunion for 50 years of rock and roll. So Ron and I just said, "Well, we'll do something," and it's always been informal, just like this is informal. Every year we do a get together, a reunion get together, and we always say, "You buy yours, I buy mine." There's no we never know who's going to show up or not show up, nor do we get caught up in that. When we do the reunion, as long as two of us get together, we're going to have a great time.
That's right.
And we never look around and say who didn't show up. We get some nice surprises from time to time. So that's really when we started planning the 100th anniversary of WDRC. Again, the ownership now, which is Red Wolf, they weren't planning anything for 100 years, the oldest radio station in Connecticut. So a friend of mine who used to be an engineer there, Kevin Morse, the cooker, as Bob Craig calls him, he said, "Well, you don't really need the radio station to have a reunion." And it's so true. There's such there was so much energy back in the station back then. So again, we sat down, a few of us, and started, and then Lainey, what we found out was 90% of that conversation had absolutely nothing to do with the reunion. And for the last 2 or 3 minutes of the Zoom, we'd say, "Okay, who's coming? Who's not coming? What do we need to do?" And that was it. So after it was all over, somehow we all kind of enjoyed, getting rejuvenating these relationships or something. And we said, "Well, let's just keep doing it." And every week I go into it, and just say, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do now?" And all it takes is one person to recall one story or one new person coming in. So when Joe said that he had connected with you, I said, "Oh, I can't even fathom, where you're at." So why don't you and Cameron try to give us an idea of where Radio Inc. is at here in 2024, and where you see the future of radio as the role that you play, where it's going?
All right, Cameron, do you want me to start? Or do you want to start, or what do you want to do?
No, go for it. I'm still waking up.
All right, yeah, I know. Yes, I'm sorry, Cameron, getting you up this early. Cameron and I came into Radio Inc. Well, I think you were in March of 2023, and I came in April. Ed Ryan, who had been the longtime editor-in-chief, retired, and they decided to split up the online editorial versus the print editorial. Cameron came in to head up radioinc.com, and it's going like gangbusters. Our news website, a whole lot of great stuff's been going on there. And then I took over on the print side of things, Radio Inc. magazine, which is, of course, an industry trade journal. They're editorially kind of different. What Cameron does is a lot of news, very much up to date news. And on Radio Inc., it's more education and training for station managers and account executives, salespeople. In any case, so we've been doing that now for getting close to a year with that transition. And one of the reasons that we made the connection with Joe, or I made the connection with Joe, is what we're active on LinkedIn. And we have a fun feature both on the website and the print magazine called Blast from the Past. So every week on Friday on the website, there is a photo from back in the day in radio and blurb about who's in there and what they were getting up to in the station and all that. And then every month, we also have our feature called Blast from the Past in the magazine, which is the same principle. One of the things that we are running into is getting a hold of photographs for the Blast from the Past features. So on LinkedIn, I always try to share our weekly Blast from the Past and let people know on LinkedIn, hey, we are looking for your photos. It's specifically, obviously, for the website, but also for the print magazine. The restrictions for the print magazine are a little stricter simply because we have to find file sizes that are 500 kilobytes or higher, because that's what's suitable for print. But in any case, Joe contacted me and said, hey, I know some folks who might be able to contribute photographs. And so he said, and Steve said, well, why don't you come on and you can talk about it, and letting everybody know this is an appeal. This is an appeal for photographs. If you have them, happy to work with you on figuring out about file sizes. Scans are fine. I've got all the details I can send to Steve. Maybe Steve can send them in an email. But we love the photographs. We love the stories that go with them, the information about the people, the stations, and but also we just like to meet radio people.
And that is, a lot of it is just sharing those stories. It's kind of what it sounds like, the same mission as this meetup is. It's to really keep that spirit alive. I know everyone talks about the corporateness of current radio. I think one of the things I worry about is that, we're losing some of the good stories, the stories back in the day. I've always been a big student of the history of radio. I spent years on air. I was on the on-air programming and production side before I joined Radio Inc. And, I guess I'm probably one of the few folks age 30 that can tell you Dan Ingram is one of their favorite radio jocks of all time. Let alone maybe tell you who Dan Ingram is. But I do. I love just radio for radio's sake, and that's why it's always exciting to see groups like this get together and share those stories. And I hope that someday, I can do this, down the road with people that were my age when I was in the on-air side of things. So I think it's a great celebration, while the headlines look forward, and it's finding where radio is going and charting that path. It's amazing to celebrate where we've been. So, and I saw Clark down there. Clark sent me a few photos a while back, so it's good to see him pop in here.
Yeah, we just got a nice one in from Danny Clayton too. I'll forward that on to you. And Dave Overson supplied a bunch of them. So I would say, guys, if you have anything, please send them on to me, and I'll send them on to Lainey, and they can share them with Cameron and do all that stuff. But it's interesting, Ron, because you've been in the business for a while, and you said that Radio Inc. recognized you back a few years ago. Why don't you tell us about what Radio Inc., the role that Radio Inc. has played in the industry since way back when you can remember?
Well, Lainey hit on it very well. Radio Inc. magazine does and did and still does, obviously, a great job with editorial content specifically geared to management and sales and ideas and training. And I haven't seen the magazine in a long time. I've been out of the business for quite a while. But back in the between the 1991 when I came back to radio to 2006 and beyond, even when I was at CRN, and Dick Cole can talk about this too, that magazine, as soon as it came in, everybody wanted to get their hands on it. And I'm serious about that. Everybody, especially the account executives, wanted to get their hands on it. So we would use it for sales meetings, where I would take articles and content and case studies, and then use them for real-time training in my sales meetings because they were so relevant and important to the development of the sales department. And then there's programming articles, engineering articles. I mean, it really is the industry. I'm sure it still is the industry leader as far as that kind of content goes.
It's a neat magazine. I came in. Cameron came in with a significant radio background. I did not, but it's wonderful to interact with people within this industry who remember the magazine and who read the magazine and who respect. We have our lists where we honor people, for their achievements in the industry, and it's really one of the one thing that I think I like the most about my job is interacting with the people who are honored on these lists for that recognition to what they're contributing to their stations and to their communities. It's really wonderful.
The highlight of my career was when I got up in front of about 2,000 people in New Orleans, Louisiana in 2002 to accept that award. And Eric handed me, and the award, I don't know if it still is, it's an old radio tube. One of the original radio tubes. That's the actual trophy. And he presented it to me, and I got up and made a speech. And that was one of the greatest days of my life. And earlier that morning, I won the race that McGavran Guild used to host a race early in the morning, a 10K race and a 5K race, and I won that. So that was a big day for me.
Oh, and you ran in the WPLR 20K too?
Many times.
Yeah. I just to add on to what Ron said, I've followed Radio Inc. since the beginning, and then its predecessor, and maybe you can, I may be wrong, but the Pulse of Radio was a predecessor, and I don't know if it was the same editorial staff or the same company. I remember sometime in fact, I have a copy of the Pulse of Radio, and I was interviewed for it. I'm trying to look at what the date was. But what I liked most about these magazines is that, and to Ron's point, it covered a variety of areas of interest to show that radio's far more dynamic than just playing songs and playing commercials, that there is a thought process to a business. And that business is not only to create a product, but also to create a connection to the listener that becomes the product, as well as to the advertiser who understands how to use the product. So I was fortunate enough to be asked to write a few articles, which I did, that actually ran in Radio Inc. 2015, 16, 17, 18 on from the sales side. And I feel kind of bad because I've missed a few of the most recent gatherings that we've had, and they've talked about sales. And I oversaw that for many years. But I have to tell you that these publications, I thought, and still do, I still read them online, because it not only keeps me connected, but it also gets me to further understand that radio hasn't gone away. It is evolving to stay relevant to younger generations. Not easy, but it's doing it. And I think the magazine is doing a good job. Plus, there aren't too many radio stations that can give you a picture of their morning drive personality doing their show in the nude. However, I don't think I'm going to give you that photo to publish. But I do have it. I could even show it here. And having an article in Playgirl magazine about it.
Was that Bob Dark?
Yes, it was.
Okay, yeah.
Was the picture dark? No, I'm sorry.
Huh?
Was the picture dark? Sorry.
It was, well, I would say in a way it was, yes. But as a matter of fact, I just got a picture of Bob about a week ago from Ray Petrarca, Jay Crawford, a current picture. And I should put them side by side because it would be hysterical. But he actually allowed me to use the the nude entry into the studio picture in a presentation that I'm going to be giving to one of the retiree organizations down here in Fairfield County. But I don't know that that should, although it would be a wonderful historical radio picture, which shows you theater of the mind, if you will.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've found is, having grown up in the business, is that with magazines like you have, it kind of I always felt I spent a lot of time on the dark side, as I call it, on the sales side. But I always felt that the more you knew about the overall industry, the more even when you went out and spoke with a potential client, if you went out and spoke about you were trying to sell a car and the only thing you knew was about the interior, people wouldn't really think you knew that much about it. But if you can speak about radio in generalities and just with a broad swipe, even though you may not be an expert in any one specific way, by seeing what would come up in Radio Ink, and to give you an idea of what was happening with the industry in general. And now the fact that you and Cameron are both into it, obviously you must see where the future is going, or you wouldn't have jumped in yourself.
I think so. What do you think, Cameron?
I mean, that's what we're trying to plot right now. And I think, like you said, it's when you have something like Radio Ink, which is, an established brand, and, it's for me, it was a dream job getting to do this. I never thought I would necessarily leave the on-air side of things. I always really, truly enjoyed that. But, it's a historic magazine. It's such a great part of radio, and it does such a amazing job of guiding radio. Between the columnists, between the stories, the interviews, it's just a great opportunity to kind of help steward the industry, which is something I don't take lightly at all. And so it's always great to get guidance and just help steer the ship in our own weird way.
Well, when you
and
look,
go
ahead, Lainey.
I was gonna say the technology is so different. One of the things that I mentioned, as a Gen Xer, they got Cameron. Are you're Gen Y?
I'm technically a millennial Gen Z cusp. It depends on who you ask and how they feel about me.
I'm solid. I'm an older Gen Xer, and just watching the way technology has changed. I still remember, having my boombox and turning that dial and having to wait if there was a song on and not knowing the title to the song's title, having to wait, or just having the wrong title to a song. And the kind of who sang that song, you'd have to wait for the DJ to talk about it. And now with the technology we have, people can look online, they can look on the app. I still listen to an actual radio, but I'll have my phone on hand so I can check the app to see who's singing that song and who is, what the title of the song is, so I can add it to one of my music services. And it's music discovery. I'm still using radio for music discovery, but the technology makes the process very different from what I was doing 40 years ago.
As you're speaking, Lainey, of this technology, many of us only have pictures that were taken for the trades specifically. Going back to the 70s and 80s and even further, because we didn't carry one of these things around, and we didn't have a camera at the ready. So I know I only have maybe a dozen or 15 pictures that are any good of my radio career, and they're not even of the highlights because it didn't have a camera around.
If there wasn't a camera bug who worked at the station, then there's not much of a record. I mean, occasionally there were guys who carried a camera with them everywhere they went, but then it's not like you could just email the picture to somebody. They get the pictures. There'd be one set of pictures, and whoever ended up with them, that's where they went.
Yeah.
Digital delivery is just the most incredible thing that we can instantly share and communicate with each other. And I think one of the biggest advances that has happened to radio during these horrible COVID years is the use of home studios. When a bunch of seasoned pros, and I think I'd rather call us that than boobs, that, we really have an opportunity to use a $200 microphone at home and throw our voice and cue the organist. It's really very, very special. And the number of folks that are out there right now could be put together in a network that would just be unbeatable.
What formats, Lainey and Cameron, what formats do you deliver Radio Inc. to now, especially when you're looking to hit some of those younger demographics and say, and of course the whole industry changing, how do you bring them in just in today's world?
I mean, on the digital side, it's not so much, like specific, like, are you talking like music or like talk formats or?
I just think overall, when you're presenting the magazine to people, what do you do to entice them to come into the magazine, and however it's delivered to them?
I think my internet skipped a little bit there. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to know how Radio Inc. reaches radio people right now, as far as how many different delivery services do you use?
I mean, for the digital side of things, we have the email, the daily e-blasts that go out around 6 a.m. Eastern time. But also we've started reaching out more in different social media channels. I mean, Facebook we've used to share headlines, but we've really had a huge response on Instagram. We've just started really kind of an Instagram account in earnest since I've arrived. And that's gotten to so many younger broadcasters because they're not necessarily getting the emails every day. And a lot of them are, but a good way to find people where they're at is Instagram. And so I've been very excited by that because you get a lot of participation that way, and it's reaching a crowd and a generation that Radio Inc. necessarily wasn't hitting before. So that's been good to see.
Do you reach them as billing it as radio or audio? What is it? What's the best word to use now?
We are radio first. We won't be Audio Inc. at any point. I mean, it is obviously selling, streaming and podcasts are what stations do now. There's a digital side that is going to be with us now, but it is always radio companies doing radio, no matter what platform you may find it on.
We also, with the print magazine, we have a print magazine that we mail to people if that's what they want, but they can also subscribe to a digital version of the magazine. We have a platform called Zinio, that's a third-party platform, and it's quite nice. But it's basically it's the experience of paging through the magazine, but it's entirely digital, and it can be seen on a computer or on a tablet or on a phone.
I've checked it out. It's pretty cool, and I also get the magazine every day online too.
Well, what do you do to generate revenue? I mean, are there ads that run in there now, or what are you doing to keep the magazine in all its different formats alive?
Oh yeah, we have ads.
And how are what kind of walls are you running into, or obstacles are you running into in today's world with the different demographics that are placing these ads, as far as, kind of standing up for Radio Inc. and I don't know if the rates are going down or up or whatever, but how do you keep that revenue flowing?
Well, it's interesting on the digital side because the print side sells a bit, and the lists I know help with that. And I'm sure Lainey can talk more about that. But on the digital side, I think one of the most interesting challenges is that the Radio Inc. brand and the headlines are so strong that sometimes we have trouble selling the website itself because everyone wants to be that first banner that pops up when you open that email every morning. But that email redirects to the website, and we had a 40% page view increase last year, which not only shows that the interest in radio and stories is there and growing, if anything, but it presents a great opportunity for anyone in the sphere of broadcasting to advertise and be seen in that way. But it's kind of getting showing that there's more sides to Radio Ink than just that daily email, or maybe necessarily that monthly magazine. Those are the very important products we offer.
So let me just go around again. This is the January 12th, 2024 edition of Radio Friends again, and we've had quite a group of friends lining up this morning. Our special guests are Cameron Coates and Lainey Peterson from Radio Ink magazine. If you're hearing us for the last few minutes, focusing a lot on Radio Ink, and they've kind of curious enough to see what we're up to here on our regular weekly get-togethers. We also have Dick Calt with us, and I think it might be interesting, Dick, to get back to you in a little bit with all the hundreds, and you and Ron, with the hundreds and hundreds of radio stations that, if not thousands, that you've dealt with through the years all over the country, and the different types of radio that's still alive and well.
You too, Steve. You too. You were there. You too. Ram. Remember the Ram deal? You were there.
The Ram heavy duty. We bought everything from LA to somebody in their basement somewhere who was changing the call letters, and same time they're cooking eggs. But
450 radio stations. We put that deal together in 3 weeks.
Yep.
That was the most. That still goes down in history as the greatest achievement we ever accomplished.
And it was the only division, as I recall, of Chrysler at that quarter that showed a profit.
That made any money. That's right.
That's right.
And that's because guys like Barry Berman and Dick Calt said, we can do that. And
we can do it.
And then we watched people dropping dead behind their computers, and we just moved the body out and put somebody else in there. But a lot of agencies wouldn't even touch what we could do, because we had the contacts and the wherewithal to really walk into any market and know every single radio station, and even have reps in those radio stations that would be able to know what we were there for. And which was, one-on-one dealing with our reps at CRN International to be able to make things happen there, and some very, very creative stuff. But that industry is that whole part of it about how the smaller guys are surviving is really something. We also have Clark Schmidt with us. Clark has a long history in radio, and has never stopped. Where you see some people go, the industry is changing. As long as there's a coat hanger available in a window, Clark is going to have a radio station somewhere. Clark will refuse to give up because he has the passion, and that's really what the industry, I think, is all about. Ed Bruder's with us, and Ed is an archivist who, between Ed Bruder and Tracy Carmen, who are both probably two of the biggest archivists in the country as far as holding on to air checks and jingles and you want to talk about history. Ed Bruder and Tracy have some historic pieces with jingles and also with pictures that go back. Ed's got his hands on pictures of WDRC back in the first couple of days they were on the air. Joe Connolly, who's had an illustrious career in the news world and continues on. I hear him all the time on WCBS in New York City doing business reports and such. Lee Gordon, who was with me at WPOP, who is also one of the biggest voices in the market for television voiceover work. Bob Craig is here. Bob is currently on the air in Philadelphia. Judge Harrigan, who's with us, and Judge has been on different stations right here in the market. Judge Harrigan was on WPOP, and I know Judge has been on numerous stations. Dave Overson, who has quite a hat that he wears between taking a radio production career. Actually, in the early days, I remember Dave would say he was in television in New York, then went into radio and built a career there, then went back into TV at ESPN as one of the first pioneers in that. Russ Oasis, who owns different radio stations around the country. At Pete Salant. Pete has, again, been all over the place. And so I guess the point is, some of these guys are have long careers and just don't want to stop because we love it. And Ron and I and other people know there's probably people on Facebook that are no longer in the industry because they're bitter about it. The salaries didn't grow with them. Their talent was always very strong. But when these corporate radio stations started saying, we're going to do it now, and you're going to pay, a quarter of what you used to make. You can stay or you can leave. And I think that the one thing that we find, and I know I apologize for talking so much, but the one thing that we find is that people really, it's not about that with us. It's about, whether you're delivering your message to one person or a million people, that's what radio's about. I mean, most of us would do it for free, then probably are doing it for free right now. But you know, it's just amazing. You know, when we talk about blasts from the past, one of the things we're able to do here is because of the mishmash of people that are here, we can talk about the past, we can talk about the present, and we can also talk about where we think the future of radio is going. But let me I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone here. As far as introducing them, is there anyone out there that would like to pipe in about the industry or Radio Inc. or whatever?
You missed John Landry.
Oh God, where did he go? Hang on a second. I'm sorry, John. Wait a minute. I'm just trying to control all of the. Oh, there he is. Okay, sorry, John. Did I miss anybody else? I'm going through quite a group of people here, and John, John has enough sins on all of us to lock us up. John was an engineer at WDRC and has done quite a few other things. And a lot of what we do here, Elaney and Cameron, is we have discussions, but then this gets blasted out to, I don't know, Dave, what do we got? At least a base of maybe 65 people or so. Well, maybe they're not, you know, joining in at all. Maybe they stop by from time to time, but it's still part of that brotherhood.
One thing I can say from the television standpoint of today's technology, just to do a production piece, you needed a control room, a switcher, a tape operator, sometimes a camera operator, and you need an audio operator. Today, you can do everything right in your own bedroom, and that's how the technology has changed, including graphics, adding your own graphics to the piece and that. I've done some stuff that was recorded nearly 50 years ago. Charlie Parker, Steve's dad, and John Rohde did a piece called Christmas Through the Years. It was a great audio piece. And I said, you know, I like to put some visuals to it. So one day I just sat down and in my house here in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and just put video to that narration. Also did another one, Christmas one, that one of the on-air personalities wrote a letter of Santa, an old man writing a letter to Santa Claus. Charlie Parker, Steve's dad, he voiced it over. He did the voiceover, and the two of us worked together and put the music and such. And then I said, yeah, I always like to put some video to this. And because of today's technology, I was allowed to do that almost 40 years later. And this is just the way the whole industry has changed. ESPN has changed. We had control rooms with tape machines and such, and now everything is digitized and digital, and a person is doing something from a cubicle, a production or something. So that's how the industry has changed, both in radio and in television. Because I can do what I used to do at DRC using a laptop. And it's amazing using the multi-tracks and such. So that's how the industry has really progressed in some ways.
That's a two-edged sword, because the technology has enabled voice tracking and having, you know, one person be the talent on a gazillion radio stations. And of course, the law changed too. When most of us started, a company could own 7 AMs and 7 FMs, and that was all they could own. And so you couldn't have a million stations around the country, and that if the technology existed, you could have one person voice tracking the midday show for 300 stations.
Well,
you had 7 stations. That was it.
Yeah. Well, the stations you're talking about were the stations that were in the same market. You know, one time you couldn't own 2 stations in the same market.
You could own an AM and an FM, and that was it.
That was it. And now you've got corporations coming in, and it's got to be tough for the salespeople, because you're selling for DRC, POP, or whatever the call letters are. You have multiple stations, and I think we've also lost a human touch to these stations, where most of these stations are all voice tracked. You voice track it, you lose that one-on-one with your audience.
I gotta say, I don't think I would blame technology. I would blame the first people who came in on the corporate side, who promised the world to shareholders, couldn't deliver it, got out, made $1 zillion themselves, and left the next generation and the next generation and the next generation of owners and operators holding the bag while they escaped with all the money after the big promises. We shouldn't blame technology. We should blame the fact that the operators, the current operators, I mean, take someone like iHeart. They owed the bank $20 billion. They went bankrupt. They got restructured. Now they owe $6 billion. Well, they can't afford to even pay the interest on $6 billion. So that shows how crazy it went. And all that money went to the original guys who made promises they couldn't deliver way back in 97, 98, through say 2005, and left everybody else holding the bag. All of us who love radio.
No, that's definitely true. But the technology also enables them to do
Sure.
that.
But I wouldn't blame technology.
No,
though,
I don't blame technology,
Yeah.
but it's the mechanism that
Yes.
those people were able to take advantage of
Yes. Yeah.
to do.
Can I
what
also
they
point
did.
out something? To me, you look at a radio station, you look at the people that are paid the least in my eyes, which is the talent. And I kind of equate that to having an employee working at the cash register at Target. The person that's controlling your inventory and your cash flow and everything else is the person that's making the least amount of money, cashing people out. And the same thing, in my mind, is true when it comes to the on-air talent that's left, holding the bag, I should say left.
Yeah, in almost any business, the people who make the most money could be gone for the largest amount of time and not be missed. And the people who make the least money are the most indispensable because the trash doesn't get emptied and the floor doesn't get cleaned and the basic stuff doesn't get done. And those are the people at the opposite end of the pay scale.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember one of the seminars we had, and somebody it was a sales seminar, and basically one of the it was either the Broadcasters Association convention or whatever it was, the Connecticut Broadcasters Association, and the gentleman giving the seminar said, "Who's the most important person in the radio station?" And everybody had different guests, whether it was the program director or sales manager, whatever. And somebody finally said it's the receptionist. And that the receptionist is your front line. And now radio stations, good luck trying to get somebody when you call a radio station. Here we are, communicators, and there's not even a live person in many cases picking up the phone. There's no one there that person that answered the phone would really be the one that represented the radio station until they got put onto whatever extension somebody was looking for. It's awful. I mean, my company that I'm with, Odyssey, is going through all kinds of stuff now, like iHeart did, as far as financial and all the other stuff falling apart. But they will eat their young. I mean, it really comes down to the fact of a radio station. We have 4 here in Hartford, and we used to have the AM. Ron was back with the FM. I mean, Ron, you could tell people how many overall salespeople were just the AM and the FM with TIC. I mean, gosh, we probably had more than
25.
Yeah, and now there's 7 people for Odyssey that sell. Last count I heard, it may be up to 8 or 9 now, that sell 4 different radio stations, and they all look at key accounts. Like right now we're looking at the 100th anniversary of WTIC coming up. Travelers Insurance Company owned it originally, and that's coming up in a couple of years, 2025. Right now they're talking about $500,000 deals they're going to do with corporate, and you're going, holy cow! It's the local guys that made it.
Steve, let me jump in for a second about that. Just this a little anecdote. The other day, I was at the Apple store up in West Farms, and I got myself a new Apple Watch. And I'm talking to the sales guy there, and he was wearing a ring, a championship football ring. Turns out he was a championship football player. I said, "Well, where did you go to school?" He said, "Western Connecticut State University in Danbury." I said, "Oh, what was your major?" I said, "Communications." I said, "Communications?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you happy here?" He said, "Well, the benefits are good. I can't make any money." I said, "Did you ever consider radio or television?" He looked at me like, "Radio?" I said, "You have a degree in communications." And it brings me back to my point. I don't think radio really never did, but certainly not now, is doing a good enough job publicizing the careers in radio. At least I never see it. Now, of course, I'm not as connected as I was, but I told this guy, you can make good money, have a great career in a fun industry. He looked at me like, bells and whistles went off. So I was trying to put him in touch with Stephanie and Vicky to see any opportunities for him to go in an interview. But that's the point. I mean, here's a guy, good-looking guy, great people skills, working in an Apple store. This guy would make a great account executive at a radio station.
That's funny because Western Connecticut State has a really good college radio program, or at least a college station. So that's interesting that he hadn't thought about that. But that's one of the things that, is very important to me as someone who's a younger, broadcaster, is that maintaining that, because there are still people out there, there are people my age and younger that love radio. We just did a whole issue in December that's Radio's 30 and under superstars. And it's not just on-air talent, it's salespeople. And these are going to be, the leaders going forward. And so it's important to tell those stories and let them be heard by people their age. I mean, and of course, obviously the leaders across broadcasting now, and the folks that are saying like, oh, no kid wants to be in radio. It's just getting that word out across the board. That's so important, like you say.
Well, Clark Smith can tell you that he benefited from Quinnipiac University getting rid of their broadcasting program. Clark, you're going to chime in on that?
Yeah, it's a weird story, but I was recovering from a pretty big heart thing and found out that Quinnipiac 1220 went off the air. I actually worked there when it was WDEE in the summer of '67. And seeing a license go away bothers me, especially in a great place like New Haven, Connecticut. At the last minute of brokering the tower deal, Quinnipiac and the tower company fixed it so you couldn't lease the towers back. And if you paid $1,000 a month, for example, to lease those towers, it would have increased the value of the property by $144,000 because tower income is a 14 times cash flow thing. Anyway, we got the station back on the air with 3 weeks to spare by finding a high wire above a dynamite shack at a go-go farm. You can't make this up. But it's on the air. It's 250 watts, highly processed, good Orban stereo. And it's also on the internet at 1220watx.com. I can run it on $1,000 a month. And I can make it sound good because of the technology, because they're great professionals like Dick Summer and John Harper that are donating their time to feed things from home. And you put together the right music mix, and it's not rocket science, but a lot of the people who have run the stations these days never changed a teletype ribbon, never cued a record, never read a newscast, or God forbid, never climbed a tower. And it's sad when universities disband their radio stations, especially when they have a big marketing and engineering and sports department. The Quinnipiac isn't even being welcoming to broadcast their hockey tournament. So there's a mentality going on in colleges that hasn't helped this. Yet I'm very proud to say the WWUH at the University of Hartford, which we signed on 55 years ago this July, is still alive and well. The only trouble is that there are no students involved. It's all retirees playing their jazz records.
Clark, there's another story like that here.
Very important experience. Ed?
Well, there's a story that I'm sure you're familiar with because it's here in New Hampshire where I live and where you used to live at Dartmouth College. They have a radio station that went back to the teens, literally. It was a shortwave station. And in World War I, some of their student operators got drafted into the military. But then eventually, as the technologies came along, they went to AM and went to FM. And Dartmouth College, WDCR, was the only commercial college station in America. Now, in the last 2 years, the station has gotten rid of its licenses. They sent them back to the commission. And they've just recently spent a bundle of money putting in new equipment for streaming. Well, that's like reinventing the wheel. This is what you were already doing. But they're now spending a lot of money, and they're trying to entice students to get interested.
I find that when the young people come in as interns or desk assistants, excuse me, at WCBS, they somehow find a job in radio, and it's not easy for them to navigate how to get a foot in the door to WCBS. But they do, some of them, and they are just like I was or we were at that age. They wanted to be in media and radio, but they are driven, and it takes them a lot of work, just like it took us, to get a foot in the door to WCBS or any radio station. One other thing I'd mention, I just ask the panel, ask you all. I understand that a lot of local radio stations are doing quite well because they don't have this crazy debt that the big companies have. And there's a little station up in northeastern Connecticut, WINY Putnam, which now has bought a repeater down on the shore. So they go on 395 from the shoreline to Massachusetts. And I listen to them sometimes. They have every possible feature sold. For instance, one example, they had election returns back in November for every town. But rather than selling it to one overall sponsor, they had a bank or some company in each town sponsoring the election returns for that town, and they kept rotating them. They have news about the schools, but again, sponsored by somebody in each town whose schools they cover. And it's great to see.
Great stuff. That's local radio.
Great to see, huh?
That's local radio. That's the way to do it. That's how you make money in radio.
That's right.
Yeah, we found, I mean, with what the folks at CRN created between, Yukon Radio Network, Ski Watch, Beach Watch, all the things that
every feature you can imagine.
Oh yeah, and of course news and the back in the day, and Dick, of course, easily can chime in on this. This is just I noticed as a guy that was working with you guys for a few years. Every station couldn't wait to get news about Connecticut from the Connecticut Radio Network. And as these big behemoths came in and bought up the stations, they'd say, we don't need to have, why would we give away rotating spots Monday through Sunday, 24 hours a day for news? I mean, inventory that was like just leftover inventory because we were very flexible as far as what we would take. And then we would put our advertisers on all these radio stations across the state and get phenomenal coverage. But Dick, you saw how all that changed. And Ron, you did too, as far as the interest in getting more local stuff.
Yeah, and it really to the detriment, to be sure. We had a full-time office up in the state capitol with Steve Kochko. Yep. As radio evolved going forward and generations changed, I think that there was a connection that could have been made more effectively in keeping newer generations by bringing their understanding of social media as it was beginning to and continue to evolve in sooner to make it a more integral part of how we communicated through the radio. Because just because social media is out there, people are still they're listening, and whether they're listening to a radio station or they're listening to TikTok or they're listening to something else, they are looking for the listening experience. And so I think, and I did this, I made a connection with a young man about 2 months ago with Connoisseur, suggesting that he talk to them about his interest in understanding how radio works as an audio medium, but also bringing to them up to the minute understanding and connection through social media, and perhaps helping them refine the connection between the two so that it becomes one experience for a listener, as opposed to people thinking, well, all I'm going to hear is music I've already heard a million times in commercials, and then they look to other places for social media. It's still evolving, but this is a real challenge.
For those of you that are just joining us right now, our special guest on this week's show are Lainey Peterson and Cameron Coates from Radio Inc. Maybe, guys, you could chime in as far as where you see Radio Inc. going with the audience of one when you start getting into the Pandoras and the Spotifys and all these other things that, like I know with my radio station, with my company, Odyssey, you can go anywhere and listen to any radio station across the globe. But if you're whatever market you're listening in, you're going to get local advertisers from that. So how do you see that affecting, especially with the Gen Xers? Well, now I guess whatever the generations are now, where do you see all that going?
I see one area that I think radio kind of dropped the ball back in the mid-1990s. And that's right before the conglomerate started to happen, before companies started flipping radio stations. Russ was talking about before about, taking the money and run. And that was the development of HD radio. And HD radio, I think, would have given radio stations the opportunity to really develop a little bit more in the way of segmentized programming. This is right on the eve of things like satellite radio, for example, which became very fragmented in what they were doing. And, if you really want to step back a little further, when we developed the soft rock in Hartford, it was really a lifestyle format where people would use it for in-work listening. They would listen to it at home. And it was really taking the edge off top 40 and progressive rock radio at the time. So we found a niche in doing that with the format at YZ. But HD radio really just kind of dissolved as the years went on. You can't even get an HD radio now in the car, and it was pretty well standard for a while. But that could have developed into, again, forms of sales for radio stations to supply formats or segmentized programming that you can't find on regular radio anymore. So HD. I think that was one of the areas. Clark, you probably could weigh in on this.
I was just going to say that HD was a sad waste.
Yeah.
Yes.
Been in cars now, for 25, 30 years. There are millions of receivers. A lot of people don't know how to switch from regular radio to HD1 or HD2. Yeah. And in the beginning, shows that were like the Deep Cut channel and the Comedy channel and the Irish channel, no offense, were not like spoilers. They were not minor leagues. They were not college radio. And to the point that was made a few minutes ago by the judge, college radio could have been truly expanded with HD. And it just wasn't. So here's a bunch of receivers that sit there, and nobody's jumping up and down. They're working on podcasting, and forgive me, but I don't think podcasting is broadcasting.
Well, let me jump in on what Bob Craig said and kind of address to his point. There was a lot of arguing, if you guys remember, in America, in the United States, about the form that HD should take. And Clear Channel, which was, iHeart at the time, wanted it to be, whatever format, whatever electronic, whatever engineering format it is now. And while satellite radio was launching, so we immediately had satellite radio as a competitor. We would not have had satellite radio as a competitor had we used the European standards for HD radio. Then once we got HD radio, Clear Channel or iHeart tried to determine who got what format in each market. There was one of their guys in Orlando, I can't remember his name now, but he'd call you and say, okay, well, let's see, you should have country, and the next guy should have soft AC. And so they were trying to determine who got what. On top of all that, they really tried to shepherd HD into the lane they wanted, as opposed to having it open for every station to determine what format they wanted to put on it.
Well, in a way, HD, or go ahead, Lainey.
No, you go ahead. I'll go. Then I'll go after you.
I mean, in a way, I think there's still promise in HD radio, especially as the dashboard evolves. I mean, it becomes more of an entertainment space, and as cars head toward self-driving. It's going to become more of an entertainment box than anything. I mean, that's what I've seen. I've been here at Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas for the past few days covering that. And there are companies like Xperi and Q that are working on using kind of that digital relay now to make a visual element in the car, which I think is fascinating. But I think one of the biggest HD problems is that a lot of stations use it to get around the ownership cap, because they're not addressing that at all. But it's easier to do an HD3 on a translator, and get around it that way than legislating. And so I think we kind of fell into a pit there.
I agree. I think it's really unfortunate that it has not been used the way it could. In Chicago, one of our NPR affiliates, they do have I think it's a hip hop HD2 channel that is quite popular in there. Now, the funny thing also is The Drive, which is a classic rock station. They have an HD2 channel, which they do not promote. There is no advertising on it. It is not streamed anywhere. You can only access it through a radio that has HD capabilities, which I have. I have a very nice Sangean radio for that. It is one of the most amazing deep cut stations I've ever heard. And it is just extraordinary. Like when you're getting an acoustic version of Yes's Roundabout, and we're getting these alternate versions that nobody's heard. And the guy or woman, I don't know who's programming it now, knows about Little Feat. Now, a lot of people don't know about Little Feat, but that's one of the best rock bands, I think, ever. Nobody knows about, but they were in Lowell George and all that.
We know.
Yeah, but you know who it is. But somebody was programming. And the thing that me and my Gen X friends love to do is I got this back porch, so we would all go out my back porch, bottle a couple bottles of wine. I'd bring my radio out, and then we would play that station. We would go nuts, and we would play Name That Band. It couldn't be Name That Tune because the tunes were so obscure sometimes, but we could play Name That Band, and it was wonderful. I recorded an hour of the programming, sent it to one of the premier program directing consultants in the country. I will not say who. He came back to me and said, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And it's sad to see this wasted potential, because there's so much that these stations could be doing. I would say in smaller communities, but in larger communities as well, where say you have, for example, a lot of immigrants, ethnic populations who might really appreciate that kind of specialized programming. There's so much that could be done to serve these communities, and it's not happening.
I got to tell you that I do have experience with HD radio, simply because where I'm doing programs in Philadelphia with Temple University's WRTI, and RTI has been on the air since 1948. And I do a few programs during the weekend that are recorded, and they're played on HD radio. And one of them is called Voices in Jazz, and I'm given the freedom to do whatever the hell I want and play whoever the hell I want, picking very, very obscure singers from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s that fringe on jazz. And it has a very, very small but select audience. We also use our HD2 channel because we are split programming on FM. FM does classical music between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m., we do jazz, real jazz. So we do make use of the HD2 channel in a couple of different ways. We shift our programming in the off hours for classical. For example, if you wanted to hear classical in Philly 24 hours a day, you'd shift over to HD or the stream. And also we have about 8 translators that cover about half the state of Pennsylvania down through the Jersey Shore, and then over through Jersey and down through Delaware. So we have a massive reach of whatever we do between streaming, HD2, and the FM. But the HD2 channel is also used for specialized programming in classical as well as for jazz. So during the daytime, it's not live, we're recorded, and we also have a service that does jazz on the HD2 channel. Outside of that, we're all live. So we do make use of the outlets that we do have. And the audience, obviously, for jazz and classical is not huge, but boy, you want to talk about loyalty. And when it comes time for fund drives, we're finding now people, we have a staff of maybe 2 or 3 people that just do fund driving alone. And the money pours in. These people are bequeathing money that is of extravagant amounts. You know, you're talking thousands of dollars from people who are in that upper demo, who remember radio when it was real royalty, and the attractiveness that it had for them, and how much they love supporting radio that's a part of their community. So there's a lot of different angles to look at radio and what it's doing today, and not only how to gain audience, but also to make money at it as well. So that's a rare example, because I think there are 2 or 3 radio stations in the country that do split programming of jazz and classical music. So this has been really kind of a fun element for me in semi-retirement to do this stuff. And, you know, how many other stations are going to do something along those lines, I don't know.
One more really quick point about HD. Think about how much easier it would have been for the general public to understand HD if they just used phantom channels to tune you to a macro to an HD station. So in other words, instead of the dial ending at 107.9, it would be 108.1, and 108.1 would really be HD1 of a particular station on the dial. And then there'd be 108.3. It really isn't 108.3, as we all recognize, but it tunes you directly to the channel. Instead of having to go to 93.5, wait for that to ramp up, then tune it to HD1, then tune it to HD2. It made no sense. That system made no sense.
Like like digital TV does.
Exactly, Lee.
I think it's weird that it seems like when HD came around, the terrestrial radio saw it as a threat, and yet the one thing that terrestrial radio has that satellite radio just doesn't have is being local, and one by one they just kept getting rid of their local component. And if they really wanted to stamp out satellite radio or make sure that it was never a threat, what they should have done was increase their local presence rather than consolidate it and get rid of it.
Wow, man, oh man, I got to tell you, holy Toledo, Cameron and really, Cameron and Laney, hopefully you'll come back again. And maybe when we gather up some pictures and stuff, we can find a way to fly some of the pictures. That would be great, to put some of the pictures into this Radio Friends Again Zoom room. I think that would be really, really neat. But oh my God, this has been quite an education. I think people have really enjoyed it. Before we close out the recording part, because as I said, you know, everybody's welcome to hang out afterwards. I just don't want to make it too much of a nightmare for Dave to edit. I don't think it will be, but we are coming up on an hour. So as far as this part of it, is there anyone who would like to say anything to Laney and Cameron, or Laney and Cameron, if you would like to say anything as we wind up the recorded part of the program?
I wonder. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for all of the time that you spend publicizing our business and encouraging the next generation to be part of it. But by the same token, the bunch of us here are not over the hill, and we have a lot to offer. And some of the folks who never cued a record or read a newscast running these groups, sadly, are messing it up for everybody. And it's a way to save them. You don't have to spend a ton of money. You just need some good old-fashioned Yankee ingenuity.
Well said.
Thank you.
Oh,
Bart.
Bob Marks. Sorry, Bob, I didn't see you jump on there. Oh my gosh, it is really something, and I think, Clark, you're a perfect example, and a lot of the guys, and Dick and Ron. I mean, we have it in our blood, and it just keeps going, and we're not concerned as far as like people say, well, how many people are watching YouTube after you do this? We know from what Dave sees and everything, for the people who do tune into these Radio Friends Again Zoom rooms, they get a lot out of it, even if they're not here. But when you look at people that have stayed relevant and stayed loving the business, I mean, come on. I mean, this is what we're all about. There's nobody sitting here saying, how many people are listening, how many people are watching no. It's all about what we get out of it. And boy, this has been a great.
You mean we don't have ratings?
Yeah, can I just make one last very fast point? I see you, Dave. I know you want to wrap. My daughter works in marketing for TikTok, and she and I talk all the time. And she's 30 years old. But when she gets in the car, she turns on the radio and she listens to it. And I discuss with her the way to turn it into a reverse connection, in the sense that what are the ways that a radio station can work with social media and further out into a TikTok area, which has such incredible reach, but yet provide an experience in return for somebody so that you can get more share of listenership. The presumption is it's over, and it's not. It doesn't have to be, because it's all a matter of what you can give to somebody that they can actually benefit from. It doesn't matter where they get it. It matters that they get it. And she and I talk about this all the time, but I find it very interesting that she, being a person in the middle of social media, goes back and listens to radio whenever she gets in the car.
Well, I think also it's like we said before, when my dad saw FM coming in and everything, oh my God, what's going to happen to AM radio and all that? I mean, he would always say, it was about the creative. It was what about, people were listening through a Kleenex box, if it's interesting enough, if it's creative. And as he used to tell the guys, and I'm sure some of you guys remember it, when guys on the air would get too hung up about ratings, my dad would say that's his job, is to worry about the ratings and where things are going that way. But the job of the person on the air was to do something that was relevant enough. If tomorrow the radio station was off the air, would anyone care that it was gone? And I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind. I think it's the same thing when we do the Radio Friends Again. Would anyone care when it's gone? And that's why with Dave wrapping up, we're going to be gone any second. Lainey and Cameron, anything you want to add before we take off?
I send those pictures. We want them. We want your stories. We really do. And don't just send, the photo and be like, tell a story with it. Because that's what makes the Blast from the Past feature so fun. And that's what brings people together and inspires the next generation. They want to create stories like that as well. So you can send them to me. I don't know if you want me to send my email to someone else. I know that
we can send them direct to you, and maybe if you do send them direct to them, you see right now on if you guys are on, you can look it down and see what their email addresses are.
I think Lainey just dropped that in the chat too. So
yeah, and I think that way, and copy me so we know where everything's going out, and then maybe Lainey and Cameron, what we could do is get some of this stuff together and have you back soon and talk about what you still need or critique what we send over to you. Because just the fact that you guys are interested enough really means a lot. And Joe Connolly, thank you so much for tracking them down and doing this. Because, in a perfect world, this isn't about anything more than keeping the brotherhood alive, the sisterhood alive, like Pete Salantis said, staving off Alzheimer's. But it's true. I mean, keeping your mind sharp that way. And it'd be great to see this kind of stuff happening all over the country. It's just I think there's a lot of people that would like to remember what it is, but not just stay back with the oldies. I think somebody mentioned recently too, I think it might have been Jim Harrington, radio stations, when they talk about oldies, why do you have to? Why don't you just, all the music can be relevant? You don't have to say this is an oldie, because none of it is. I mean, you really have to look at it that way. But you guys are awesome. Lainey, you good?
Yeah, I'll also send thank you. We also have, if you know anything about the equipment, I know particularly for the print version, there's a real desire for equipment. And if you know anything about the equipment, that's great too.
Thanks a lot, guys. Anybody else? You good? We all set? Anything you want to jump in on before we go? We good?
This
It's
is
great to see everybody.
Great.
Great
Thank
to-
you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you
Hey,
so
Joe,
much.
great to
Joe
see
and
you.
Steve, thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
doing
I
it.
appreciate
A lot
it.
of fun, yeah.
No,
All right.
that's going to be it for this edition of Radio Friends Again, January 12th, 2024. And let's all try to get together next week on the 19th for another edition of Radio Friends Again. So take care, everybody.
Your friend has got a lot to share.